Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
Well, it is more than ironic that one of the most prevalent and current complaints employers have is this chorus of not being able to find qualified workers. Really? Given the statistical high rates of unemployment in the Carolinas, the anecdotal stories of those without a job that would like to find work, that does not seem to square up. Welcome and thank you again for watching the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William, and what is behind this mismatch of labor supply and demand, and is it bad policy or lack of workforce resources or both? We will start this critical dialogue in just a moment.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded October 4th, 2013. On this week's program, Dr. James Brewer of Mitchell Community College, Lew Ebert of the North Carolina Chamber of Commerce, Dr. Keith Miller of Greenville Technical College, and Otis Rawl of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. And now, here's Chris Williams.
Hello, welcome to our program. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you all here.
Good to be here.
Otis, you're going to get the first pitch. You know, we've talked, you've been on this program.
Right.
You've heard the dialogues, and not just on this program, but Otis, from your members, from dialogues that are going on in the Palmetto State, this whole idea of a workforce skills gap, and that is the rate of unemployment in South Carolina is not as high as North Carolina, but it's pretty high historically, and it seems ironic that workers or employers say that they can't find skilled workers. Why is that?
Well, I think the skill sets have changed so significantly over the last 4 or 5 years on we needing more technologically advanced workers to come primarily into our advanced manufacturing facilities. And, you know, part of it is not having the skill sets, but a lot of it's not having the right people where the jobs are being created. So we rely on Keith and his group a lot to just be able to say, okay, we may not have a ready workforce right now, but we will have a ready workforce for you when you come or when you decide to come into a location. But what we're finding, really, Chris, more than anything else, is we got a lot of liberal arts majors that are coming back to our technical colleges that could not find a job in the liberal arts. And really, our technical colleges almost turn into graduate schools for our four-year universities. In some ways, these people are coming back, and in some of our technical colleges, we're finding as many as 20% of the students that are coming back are people that have graduated or had from a four-year university or had a job, coming back to get a different skill set to be able to find a job that's being created in South Carolina right now.
Now that answers part of the question. Before we drill down that rabbit hole, Keith, Lew, same question. How is this unique gap? Why is that happening?
Well, I think our economies are very similar. Manufacturing is a big part of North Carolina. We're the 5th largest manufacturing state in the country still.
Even after the evisceration of all these jobs in the last decade?
Absolutely. But I think to Otis's point, it's high skill, high wage. It's a different kind of manufacturing, but it's a big time part of our economy. But I think to Otis's point, it requires a different level of talent, a different set of skills. North Carolina can compete with high skill, high wage jobs, but the dollar an hour jobs are going to go somewhere else. And that's probably the way you want it. So I think we're economies in transition. I think in our state, just like in South Carolina, community colleges really are the secret weapon that enable that transition to happen. So I think our states are well positioned with that kind of resource.
Do you all feel like, Keith, Tim, do you guys feel like you are at ground zero when it comes to workforce development and being the ones that are the standard bearers, if you will, to develop and to close this gap? Is that where you are?
Absolutely. I would agree we are at ground zero, but that ground zero looks different than it did 10 or 15 years ago. Like the comments that have already been made, the skill requirements that are out there in the workforce now, whether it's manufacturing, healthcare, or anything else, are different. But when you step back from that and think about what high-tech skills are necessary, and think about the foundational skills, the math, the English, the reading, the writing, communication type skills, those requirements are different also. And that's where we find our challenges is upgrading those foundational skills so the individual has a basis on which to learn computerized manufacturing equipment or technology in the healthcare setting, whatever the case may be, and understanding that the workforce is completely different. I mean, manufacturing was already mentioned. The manufacturing of today is not the manufacturing of yesterday. So it's also an educational process, that it's robots and it's a high-tech industry. It's not the old dirty shop floor as it once used to be.
You know, Tim, this is interesting that you've got higher ed diplomaed people that are now becoming community college candidates.
Right.
So I guess I'm trying to back into a question here, and the question would be, why is it that such a large swath of the population, and I'm not talking about those just without a job, but why are so many people resistive to finding this new training when they know clearly that that's the way to go? Is it dollars to go back to school? Is it time?
I think there's a couple of issues in North Carolina. I think South Carolina would share some of the same issues. We've talked about the loss of the traditional industries. The new industries, the new manufacturing is nothing like what once was. And I think many of our parents of younger students and the general population, when they think of manufacturing, they don't think about the high-tech, high-skill, high-wage. You're oftentimes working in clean rooms, and it's nothing like what it once was. And I think one of the issues is helping to educate people, starting early with parents of children in elementary school, to let them know what manufacturing is truly like now, what those wages are really like. And I think that's a part of the problem. Part of the problem is getting people to realize what we're talking about when we talk about advanced manufacturing. It is nothing like what it was, and it's high skill, high wage.
Is the sexiness of manufacturing, as Tim just described it, is that the issue? Is that an issue?
Well, it's interesting. I know this show will air next week, but today's actually Manufacturing Day all across America. And actually each of our staff members are somewhere in North Carolina at a manufacturing plant highlighting that fact. Shows like this certainly help to do that, but I think it's interesting when you talk about this skills gap, because I think what studies now show us is, think about when we went to college, we talked about you're going to be an accountant and you're going to be an accountant the rest of your life, but we're actually talking to students now that might have 5 or 6 different careers, totally different careers in their lifetime. And that's kind of hard for a lot of people to grasp. So I think part of what we continue to see here is an economy in transition, and manufacturing is right there, but boy, we're in a great position as a state and a country. Foreign direct investment is coming back to this country. Manufacturing is coming back from overseas. And I think our states are well positioned to take advantage of that, but that talent, we like to talk in terms of talent, that's the new economic coin of the realm. The states that can develop the talent to meet the task will be the ones that win.
So as we have these 35,000-foot questions, when you have them at your future forum and among some of your membership and leadership, and even on your boards, or with your vice chancellors or vice president, how does is it trickling down is not the most accurate way to say it, but how does it start to kind of diffuse and settle out into those who should be taking advantage of this?
Chris, we did a study in South Carolina about 2 years ago and really looked at where the jobs could be created and what type of skill set you needed. And you look at only about 10% of the jobs could be created is going to need something less than a high school education. And there's a pretty good balance in South Carolina. About 20-25% are going to be created in needing 4-year jobs. But about 65% of the jobs that's going to be created are going to need some type of mid-level skills or stackable certificates to get where they need to be. But we only got about 29% of the people in South Carolina that's got the type of skill sets they need. So there's a significant gap that's there. And what we're doing in South Carolina to try to do that is we're working with our technical colleges to put a manufacturing skills certification certificate in, which is a 140-hour course that all the technical schools go have. And if you graduate from or get the certificate from Greenville Tech or Midlands Tech or Horry County Tech, people will know what that involves. But I think it goes deeper than manufacturing. We've got the same issues in IT. We had it in the healthcare areas. So it's just not manufacturing. It's across the spectrum in the types of jobs that we're doing. And I use Boeing as a classic example. When they came, we'd never built an airplane in South Carolina, much less something that was dealing with composites. So all of a sudden, we had to train a whole new workforce on building planes, composites, being able to drill 7,000 holes technically right to put on a wing. And guess what? Our technical colleges delivered for us on that. So we've got the expertise in our community colleges and technical colleges to do it, but we need to make sure that we're providing the right skill set, testing so that when they walk out of here through work keys and things of that sort, where manufacturers and the businesses know what kind of work are they getting and what they're capable of doing.
You know, we know that this isn't a challenge just in North or South Carolina. It's a national challenge, and I think, as you mentioned, the state, the area, the region, whatever that figures out the solution to this is going to be a winner for the long term. When you look at it, at least in the upstate, in many ways, some of our manufacturers are in the talent management business. In other words, trying to recruit that skilled individual from outside of the area, and we're trying to put in a system that makes us transition to a talent creation business, and that's what it's going to take to win the race that's out there, to create that talent ourselves rather than searching, because everyone is searching for that talent, not just in the Carolinas. And I think when we talk about especially manufacturing, actually putting together the education and training programs is the easy part. The difficult part is creating that understanding and that interest in the young individual and the older adult that has been out in the workforce, that is a viable career and it is a workable career.
And let me go ahead, Tim. Do you have?
Well, I was just going to say, it's no secret that successful businesses and industries value education. We know that. And getting back to your point, just as an example, we have a back-to-work program at the institution I'm at, and that is an open-door program for the unemployed or underemployed. And just to give you an example, we have an HRD component, which basically is helping somebody write a resume, how to dress for an interview, how to answer questions.
What's HRD?
HRD, Human Resource Development.
Okay.
Human Resource Development. And just to give you an example, we'll have individuals who come to us who may have been working for 30 or 40 years in the traditional, as we've known it, manufacturing, and have been unemployed for 2 or 3 years, and finally, as a last result, come to us. And you mentioned earlier, there's a lot of remediation that goes on early on, but once we get them through those early stages and get them into the occupational training that gives them the skill sets, they do become productive, but that takes a lot of time, and that's part of that gap that's created. We are able to do it, but we're working with people who have been underserved in so many different ways.
Hold on just for a second. You talk about Boeing, and I want to use that as a segue. Next week on this program, from the Low Country, in fact, and he's been here before, Jim Newsom is the president and CEO of the South Carolina Ports Authority out of Charleston, has done some pretty amazing things when it comes to growth and development of the ports, given some of the political headwinds. Jim will be here on our program again next week. Lew, let me come to you, and I know you were going to say something. But in the upstate of South Carolina, Greenville Tech, we talked about the Low Country. In North Carolina, when it comes to policy, there seems to be a challenge Don't know how it's going to pan. So here's the question. North Carolina Commerce is going through a reorganization, and the proposal is privatization. How does that affect some of this issue that we're talking about? Is that going to handicap, sideline North Carolina to some degree in this?
You know, I think you have an administration that's taken a look at the fact we haven't created any net new jobs since the turn of the century. And a lot of economic activity going on, but we haven't produced a lot of results. So I think any governor would probably take a close look and say, can we do it better? And they're busy out talking to folks around the state to get a feedback on that. But I think part of our challenge here is qualitative and quantitative. I think we're also working right now, we're told nationally, actually, we have the highest quantity in North Carolina of certified skill-ready talent available right now. They're just not indexed in a database where you can find them. So think about that. With the third highest unemployment rate in the country, the talent is already there, but the companies just can't find them. And then on the qualitative side, I think our states are among 45 states that are busy implementing the Common Core. So think what happens when we start bringing a better product out of K through 12 to the community college and higher education. Instead of talking about remediation, we could talk about upping the game with these higher, we're actually calling them higher standards, HIRE standards.
Yeah.
So think what happens when we start bringing young people out of high school with higher standards. We think our states, and I think South Carolina too, will be in a better position to compete because now these fellows can spend time upping the game. Once they have them in community college, you're not starting over. For
North Carolina specifically, what's the gestation of that, you think? How long does it take before we see some real results?
I think the Common Core has been implemented right now. We'll see, I think, the first test results this month. It won't be quite what I think some folks are used to, but I think the level of rigor that modern businesses require, the level of rigor globally that students around the world are attending to, our states are now joining, that level of participation. I think it's going to put our young talent in a position to compete, not just right now, but over the next several decades, with a lot of countries that are very seriously leaning into this issue.
Keith, you are not picking on you, but you are in a great spot. I mean, you've got, and you have a long history. You've got Michelin, you've got BMW. That is, both of those are the 900-pound gorillas that just continue to give. And what a great economic development story that has been. That makes it easier for you than it would for someone down in Colleton, South Carolina, or Hertford County, North Carolina. So you seem to have the wind at your back when it comes to some of these workforce development issues. You get high profile, you have a lot going on. What would you tell some of these more rural workforce development folks that are trying to find some traction?
That it takes a lot of partners to make it happen. Even as you said, even without, with Michelin, with BMW, we're on the cusp of creating a whole new system of workforce development focused on manufacturing, and right now that's titled the Greenville Tech Enterprise Campus. But Greenville Tech can't do that by ourselves. It does take the partnership of Michelin. It does take the partnership of BMW. It takes the partnership of the leadership at the county level. It takes the partnership of the K-12 system to make that happen. We've heard of all the challenges here today, and one thing that's very clear is even if we could afford to operate in a vacuum, we wouldn't be successful operating in a vacuum. I think industry knows, manufacturers know that they need to step up to the plate and have stepped up to the plate. When you talk about BMW and Michelin, and we have other industries also, we've created what we call Tech Scholars Program with those industries. And as I said, the challenge is not so much putting together the education and training program. We know how to do that, and we're about doing that, and we're about changing that. Our growth is over 100% in some of those manufacturing-related programs, but you still have to generate the student interest. So the Tech Scholars Program is an example of where industry has committed to pay tuition fees and books for any student that goes into manufacturing and pay them a stipend while they're in the program. So essentially it comes as close as possible to guaranteeing a job at the end of their higher ed career at Greenville Tech and not having any debt.
Okay, Odie, you just heard Keith talk about partnerships, and let me take this a little bit. This is a policy question in South Carolina, higher ed. And I think everyone has given high marks to James Barker from Clemson, Harris Pastides from USC, Ray Greenberg from MUSC, even George Benson at the College of Charleston, and 3 out of 4 have left or are leaving. So when there is major change in a partnership of traditionally very competitive schools, research universities, and that's changing, how does that factor into this workforce development dialogue?
Well, I'd like to say in South Carolina that we go hire capable people to fill those jobs that will continue to partner. I think as much as anything, and I think Lew will tell you this, I think businesses will drive the process to where we need to go. I think
You think schools are driving that process now?
To a large extent, I think they're beginning to listen to what curriculum needs to look like, what the jobs are going to be created, and how they work and educate kids to those jobs and young adults. And for a long time, I think the entire K through 20 system didn't really listen to businesses. But in the last 5 to 10 years in South Carolina, that partnership is being driven by businesses with education from K through 20, sitting down and talking what's important, what do we need to be teaching these kids, are we addressing your needs? So I see the business community continuing to drive this process regardless of who the person in academia is. And I think Keith will tell you, we've got strong business partners in South Carolina that's willing to put the money up to do what needs to be done, and it makes it easy for him. And I mean, it's not only for Keith, I mean, they're creating bridge programs at Greenville Tech to go into Clemson University and engineering programs and things. So this collaboration that we've got will not go away. Will not go away.
You know, and let's talk about that for just a second, Tim. Do you think in North Carolina, and again, this is just going to be a bit of a policy question, but Otis makes a good point that it seems like business is going to take the lead, or should at least take a meaningful part of this leadership thing. Can this be done with the way policy currently is, or with the levels of funding that you currently receive? Can this be done that way?
The point, I think, is that we've got to be offering relevant programs. If we are not offering relevant programs that's serving the needs of business and industry, then we're not going to be successful. In North Carolina, the funding system for the community college system is now based on a tiered funding system. And if you're in a higher placed tier, which generally are high cost programs, which oftentimes are related to technical and applied science programs, then that institution is going to get more money to run those programs. So from a policy standpoint, it's really getting to the bottom line as far as funding and running programs at institutions. It encourages community colleges to look to those higher tech, high wage earning programs and offering those, because that's, if you're doing that, you're going to get more funding. You're higher on the tiered processing system. So I think that's very much relevant to what's going on. We also have a performance funding model now that's set up in a way that rewards
student performance or college performance?
College performance.
Okay.
That is related to students' performance in certain areas. The performance funding process now is tied very closely to student success in these areas that serves manufacturing and industry. So those things are already in place at the institution. And again, I keep going back to being relevant. If we as an institution are not talking to business and industry on a regular basis, even at the instructional level, we encourage our lead instructors in applied science areas, you need to be making the contacts and you need to be talking directly to advisory committees and so forth. Because if you're not relevant, you're not going to survive, and we're not doing the services we need to be doing to serve business and industry. And I think the policies are in place and will continue to support that.
We have about 30 seconds left. When can you declare victory that workforce development is being addressed?
I think you're never done. I think the world continues to change. We need to move at the speed of business. We're lucky to have leaders in our state that are busy doing that. Resources aren't the only challenge. I think growing the economy is really what we've recognized as a business community. The pie is shrinking. We need to grow the pie. And I think the focus that Tim and others are bringing are appropriate. When you're customer driven, we're all focused on the same opportunity, which is how do you grow the economy? And when you do that, you put our states in a better position to compete.
Thank you. That's the last word, Lew. Tim, good to have you on the program.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Great to be
Otis,
here.
always nice to have you back. Good luck, Keith, and thank you for
Thank
being
you.
here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next week, as I said, Jim Newsom, South Carolina Ports Authority. Very interesting dialogue because it's a very interesting business model that continues to evolve. Until then, I'm Chris William. Have a nice weekend. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.